What is up, guys? This is Thomas Christopher of the League Winners. This is another episode of college football. Now, for those who aren't aware, we're a credentialed media organization that covers college football from the G6 to the P4 levels. This show is all about college football, the matchups, recaps, key players, all from people who are either on site, live at location, or so entrenched in college football that they might as well be. Don't forget, while you're watching this video, please make sure to like, subscribe, share the video wherever you can. Now, we don't have a nice little intro video for you guys yet. We will eventually have that, but for now, I'm just hitting you with the cold open. So, and I'm pleased to have, my guest in the green room right now. It is Brandyn Pokrass. Brandyn covers FAU football for us, as well as FIU and USF. So let's bring Brandyn in here. Brandyn, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Happy to be here. Happy to be talking some college football. Got a little bit of some NFL football. Got a little fantasy draft going on at this moment. So, but that, never really have done a live pick before. So first live pick, I think we are going to go with Monroe St. Brown here. So yeah, happy to be here.
That's a great choice. We're gonna see how well he can juggle two things at once. Now, while unfortunately, Brandyn overslept for our power rankings.
There's a good reason, I promise.
Yeah, for those who don't know, me and Brandyn actually, two different parts of the country. We're on multiple long trips. I was on a 3-day bender covering Delaware football, Army football, and Florida Atlantic in Maryland. Meanwhile, Brandyn was at Tampa covering USF, Boise State, as well as FIU versus Bethune-Cookman. But for everyone viewing, we're going to bring in the league winner power rankings, and I'm going to put that up on there right now. Now, this is a combination of, strength of schedule, the opponents being beat, and now this is not to reflect the AP polls. This is personally the league winners power rankings. We go 1 to 25 like the AP poll, but it's just, based on people's opinions who are live on site, seeing the game, and just, as I mentioned before, entrenched in the college football world. Now, we'll start with the top three. First is Ohio State. I feel like that's kind of a no-brainer after what they did to Texas. Penn State comes in at 2. Georgia is at 3. Going out with the top 5 is LSU at 4 and Oregon 5. Rounding out the top 10 is Texas, fall down to 6. Miami is at 7, surprisingly. South Carolina at 8. Notre Dame 9. And Arizona State at 10. Brandyn, are there any surprises for you on the top 10 right here?
I mean, honestly, not really. Like, I feel like Ohio State, I'll put it like this. If Ohio State isn't your number one, I don't know what football you're watching, to be completely honest. Like, they're phenomenal. And that offense is only going to get better. I think Penn State, I'm fascinated to see what they look like when the competition gets amped up. I think the FIU matchup, as we'll get into in a little bit, could be interesting in some ways. Georgia is Georgia. LSU, huge win. I'd argue you could potentially raise LSU up to number 3, and then you have Oregon, Texas, Miami, South Carolina, Notre Dame, Arizona State. If anything, I'd say I'd put Miami above Texas just because I'm a huge fan of what they have going on. I think they'll only get better this season.
Yeah, it's very interesting to see how Mario Cristobal is going to coach that team. As if you guys have listened to the show, I wasn't entirely huge on Carson Beck. Proved me a little bit wrong in week 1. And it's great to see, obviously, just because I don't think somebody's going to do great, that does not mean I'm rooting against them. So now we're going to finish out, the rest of this list here. 11 is Clemson, who had a loss this past week. Florida comes in at 12, Illinois 13, Michigan 14, and Oklahoma 15. And then rounding out to the top 20 is Alabama, comes in at 16, drops 9 spots. SMU is at 17, Iowa State 18. Tennessee, who defeated my Syracuse Orange, is at 19. And the Ole Miss Rebels are at 20. Now, hitting into that 10 to 20 range, any surprises there for you?
Taking a look at it again. No, not really. I guess if you want to throw out a surprise, I'm surprised that Iowa State went, if I can read this correctly, I'm surprised Iowa State went down 2. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
I feel like Iowa State's been one of the best teams in the country. Like, people still have a very good view of Kansas State. Iowa State played a very good game against them and then had no issues against an FCS opponent. Um, Kansas State did, right? So like I feel like Iowa State has shown that they can, especially coming off that Ireland trip, get the job done. I don't exactly know why they're below a team like Alabama. I guess the Alabama ranking is more of like, all right, maybe it was just like a tough game in week one, but
Right.
Florida State was unranked, right? Like I feel like Alabama needs to be closer to that 20-ish range, especially considering the opponent that they faced. Now, if Florida State becomes a powerhouse over the season, that's a different story. But I just think that that's the one team that stands out to me the most, where I'm like, I probably would raise them a bit higher.
Yeah, Alabama is the surprise for me there. I know that they've dropped to 9 spots, but personally, I would have them lower, probably closer to 20 on this list. And then the other one is Michigan, where I'm not entirely impressed with how they performed in week one, considering their opponent. I probably would have dropped them a little bit too. It's a little weird seeing SMU and Iowa State actually drop 2 spots, considering how their week one went. Now, rounding out the final, 5 spots, we have Texas A&M at 21, Georgia Tech at 22, Utah 23, Texas Tech at 24, and Indiana at 25. We also have some honorable mentions here that I'm going to go through real quick, and that is Florida State was given a vote, BYU, Auburn, Louisville, South Florida, and Kansas State all received top 25 votes. Are there any surprises with you with that 21 to 25 range and the teams that got honorable mentions for us?
You got to get Florida State on that top 25. Like I'm sorry, just looking at where the different teams were at, like I think Florida State and USF are two very interesting conversations, but they're also slightly different. Like USF beat a ranked opponent, but it was the number 25 team. They're also a group of 5 team, right? Whereas I think if USF takes care of business either this week or next week, they will be on the top 25 rankings. Florida State beat what was considered one of the top 10, top 12 teams in the country in Alabama. Like
Yeah.
I don't know what else they have to do to earn a spot on the week 2 rankings.
Yeah, I completely agree. And just so anybody can see, you can see our some of the lists that we have here. I did, in fact, put Florida State on my list. Just wanted to get that out of the way so nobody attacks me. Make sure you guys attack some of the other fellows who are on this list here who did not add them. I also added USF, which gotta love USF. They performed pretty well in their matchup there against Boise State. But are there any teams that, looking at this top 25, we went through the list, we see the honorable mentions. Are there any teams that you think could find their way into the main top 25 as we're about to enter week 2, sorry?
I mean, Florida State, right? Like I feel like that's the layup. And then if I don't know if we're segueing right here immediately, but like USF has a golden opportunity to not only cement themselves as the group of 5 playoff contender, but also the playoff contender that knocked off an SEC school or the team that knocked off Miami. Like, more than any other team schedule, USF has the opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. And we will get to that in a minute once we bring in that other correspondent. I'm sure she'll be here for relatively soon. But before before we get to that point, I do want to talk some more G6. I guess it's G6 now, since they don't consider the Pac-12 a part of the power conferences. Sorry, Pac. You hate to see it. But for those who aren't aware, Brandyn does cover multiple teams for us as a correspondent. You really got to be impressed with that work ethic, because covering one team's hard enough. Covering 2 to 3 teams is, borderline insanity. And that's kind of what we like doing here at the League Winners. We are all kind of football maniacs. But I want to start with the good first, and that is FIU versus Bethune-Cookman. They honestly, no disrespect to Bethune-Cookman, but FIU beat the brakes off them, and you were live in attendance for that game. Can you just give me, first off, there's a lot of talk about FIU not being able to bring people into the stands. That was a big concern last year before Willie Simmons was on the team. Now it seems like they were able to kind of change that. I know it's a home opener. Fans usually show out a little bit more for those. But can you just give me your thoughts on how the environment was, despite there being, an hour or so rain delay?
Yeah, I thought the environment was pretty good, all things considered, right? Like I didn't expect a sold out crowd when there's a legitimate monsoon and a hour plus lightning delay and still raining by the time, all the fun things that go into a football game that can just hamper everything. But look, when it comes down to it, the biggest thing for a new staff, a new quote unquote era in a program, is to start fast. And there were some mistakes. There were some things that this team needs to improve on. But man, if you don't come away just saying this got off on the right foot, you're looking at it completely wrong. You just are. And on offense, it comes down to the run game, whether it's KJ Owens, whether it's Anthony Carey, whether it's Devontae Lyons. FIU got whatever they wanted on the ground. And that's not even talking about the escapability and rushing ability of Keelan Jenkins, who doesn't even really want to do that, by the way. He just does it when it's forced upon him, and he's very good at it. The passing game, I think this passing game is so interesting because I don't know if that's the main way that FIU is going to want to win games, but they have a ton of talent in that area. Like they were a few inches away, or like a little bit more accuracy away, or a drop away from having some big plays. I think Kyle McNeil and Eric Nelson is a duo to watch. And that's not even getting into Alex Perry, which would obviously make it a trio. But Perry is the prototypical X. He's the guy that's going to be on the outside for them all the time. And they threw him a tunnel screen on one of the plays, which, that's not exactly a play you expect from a guy of his size, but he can do it. And that's something that they've been emphasizing. They like moving him around the formation a lot. And he's not just a guy that is just going to be what I think some people will call it I'm trying to use the word decoy X, or like a guy that's just trying to take away or take attention off other guys. McNeil, insanely explosive. I think there was a slant where he had probably a good 3 yards of separation on this throw. And if the throw's a little bit more upfield, it might have been a touchdown simply because of the athleticism and space he already had. Eric Nelson made 2 of the best catches of the entire night, one of which was a sliding grab on the sideline. Initially ruled incomplete, then it was ruled a completion. Then the backup quarterback, Joe Pisanski, threw an absolute dime. Nelson gets his feet down.
He looks great.
Gets FIU into the red zone and Carey then punches it in. Yeah, there's just a lot there that I'm a fan of, and it's just a matter of how does it all mesh together, right? And that we're not even getting into some of the freshmen who, before the season, head coach Willie Simmons brought their names up: a Tyson Carter, Amari Isaac, these guys that will be on the field at some point. So I think there's obviously room to grow. There's obviously room for this Panthers team to get better on the offensive side of the ball. But like I said, for the first game to score 6 rushing touchdowns, I don't care what opponent you're playing. This is an FIU team that has struggled to find consistent success in the past few years. This was great to see. And then defense, look, were there some coverage breakdowns and some coverage miscommunications? 100%. Is that going to fly in this week's game against Penn State or against FAU or in conference play? No, but it's week 1. That is where it gets worked out. And guess what? The pass rush got there. Keegan Davis and Kenan Simmons, very, very good. Johnny Chaney Jr., a.k.a. the Chainsaw, as he is called by this coaching staff, everywhere for this defense. There was a lot of good on that unit, and I'm not even getting into Brian Blades II, who was targeted maybe one time, and the only reason to give up a completion is because Bethune-Cookman's wideout made one of the catches of the night. Or Victor Evans III, who was everywhere in coverage, right? Like, it's everything that you wanted to see because it translated from the fall and the spring into the first game. Now, how do you take that forward? And I think that's the biggest question.
Yeah, I mean, for those who aren't aware, FIU ended up winning that game 42-9. Brandyn alluded to the 6 rushing touchdowns, no passing touchdowns, but that's honestly because why pass if you're having that much success on the ground? And that's not to say they didn't have success, because they did. He mentioned Pazanski before, who actually went 4 or 5 for 46, not bad at all. And Keon Jenkins, he went 18 of 30 for about almost 200. So they passed when they needed to. They did well. It was a great performance. In fact, so great that somebody actually gave them an AP poll vote in the top 25. Before we bring in our next guest, I just wanted to hear your thoughts.
It was the coaches poll.
Yeah, I wanted to hear your thoughts on that. Do you think that was Simmons, or do you think what do you think that was?
I think the funniest thing is I was coming out of the presser today, and Kevin Barrow does great work also covering FIU. He looks on his phone and it's like, FIU got a vote in the coaches poll. We're like, there's no way. Yep, no, they got one singular vote in the coaches poll. FIU, the team that just played Bethune-Cookman and the team that wasn't even bowl eligible last year, got a vote in the top 25 in the coaches poll. I don't know who did it. I think that's great that they're getting the recognition. My semi-conspiracy take is that it was Penn State to give themselves a better matchup for out of conference because of their beginning of the year out of conference late. So that's my working theory.
I don't hate that, to be honest with you. That would, hey, from Penn State's point of view, that would make sense, man. Lift up your opponent. I mean, we saw Franklin actually mention Willie Simmons, a lot of the positional coaches, as well as tertiary players on FIU. That as a fan of FIU, even if you're not a fan, you love to see a coach taking that seriously. Now, before we get to the one G6 team that we covered that didn't do too hot this week, I do want to bring in our other correspondent who covers the USF Bulls and was present with Brandyn for their major victory over the Boise State Broncos. We have Mackenzie Negley here. Mackenzie, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
I'm doing fantastic.
Doing great.
Yeah. For those who weren't aware, Mackenzie, last week was your first real game as a reporter and part of the could you just tell anybody listening right now what your experience was like for your first time, the nerves, the emotions? Just let everybody know how that was for you.
So going into it, I was really nervous, but once we got there and all the pre-game rituals, all the just looking up at everything from the box, it's really just the coolest experience, and it was really something special to be a part of, and especially that game was just crazy season opener for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we all kind of predicted that USF was gonna kind of find a way to make it happen against Boise. I think that was one of the few that we all kind of had where we were kind of picking against the grain, thinking that they were going to win there, and they ended up winning. How was the environment in the press box, and not just the field and fans? Because I know they're going crazy, but what was it like in the press box with the other reporters there?
You could tell there were certain points where we were just how did that even happen? Or everyone would just start going crazy at some point. It was kind of calm in the beginning. We were kind of Boise scored first, and we were kind of waiting. We're okay, maybe we're gonna see what happens. And it was just thing after thing after thing USF was doing, and it just, by the end of the night, everyone was how did this even happen?
Yeah, it's got to be a surreal moment, and for a lot of people, especially in the Florida area, who aren't aren't as big as fan of the Bulls, they didn't take too long to try to come out and attack South Florida there for their early showing. turned out to be a little too preemptive on that. And Brandyn, I want to go to you. Is there anything that kind of stuck out to you in the first half where, USF did have that slow start and then they started to get things together?
I think it was the energy level. Like it was the energy level, and specifically the energy level on defense, right? So, you're coming out and obviously it's the first game of the year and the offense starts a little bit slow because, a lot of offenses need to get their footing underneath them, need to work through the kinks, a drive or two. But man, this USF defense consistently was flying to the football, around the football. And once they started forcing the turnovers and once they started delivering the big hits and just making Boise State feel their presence, they were off and running. And ironically, the same thing could be said on the offensive side of the ball. Once, Byron Brown started showing off the otherworldly rushing ability that he has and put a defensive back through the earth on one of his runs, it felt like the momentum changed for the offense. Because once that happened, they drove down the field and they scored. And then they scored again. And then the fake punt happens. And all of a sudden you look up and it's like 21-7. And you're like, wow, I didn't expect that. And then you look up and Boise State's offense literally became Maddox Madsen running for his life and trying to pick up yardage as multiple Bulls defensive linemen are chasing him in the back. Like, it happened so fast, but it's truly a testament to the type of roster, the type of coaching, and just the type of energy that the Bulls brought. And to Mackenzie's point, everyone's kind of looking at each other, and everyone talked about it once we got to the presser. Like, yeah, we had confidence that USF had the ability to win this game, right?
Right.
Boise State, in theory, like in a lot of our minds, was a team that was on the level of USF. For USF to win the game like that, though, that's a statement. And it's very hard to make a statement in week one, but that was a statement win.
Yeah, I mean, they broke that 0-18 streak against ranked teams. You really love to see that. And they didn't just beat them, in a matchup. They beat the bricks off of them. That was a very one-sided affair for a team that came in, top 25 ranked. And now they have another challenge ahead as they face the number 13 ranked Florida Gators in the Swamp. Mackenzie, I want to go to you. Like, are there any key players that you're looking at for this matchup to try to win in one of the hardest environments to play football?
I think you have to utilize Nico Grammatica when you can for those field goals, because he could hit those long yardages. I mean, Chaz was a good go-to for receivers with Byram. I think he could be very useful. And then on defense, Jalen Schuler was reckless. So I expect him to kind of have one of those big performances again too.
Yeah, he was one of the players of the week, if I'm not mistaken, for USF. And then you mentioned Chaz Nimrod; he looked good too. I mean, obviously Brown looked great at quarterback. The Mac Harris, who you actually wrote an article about this summer, he actually came through, and I'm pretty sure he forced a fumble, if I'm not mistaken, against Boise. So those are great. Great names. And also Grammatica almost beat his father's record. Well, he got close to his father's record in the stadium last week. So I think that was very, very cool to see. It's kind of just cool to see, legacy kids come through and just play and just really play well. I always love seeing that. Now, Brandyn, you will actually be at this game. What are you looking for? How do you think that environment at the Swamp is going to be? And do you think that the stage might be a little too big for the Bulls, or do you think that they're prepared?
I mean, I think if the stage was a bit too big, you would have saw signs of that last week, right? Like a nationally broadcast game, ESPN game. Like this is the type of game where teams can fold, and like I don't want to get too like 2020 hindsight with it. USF or not USF, Boise State is coming off the college football playoff and was the number 25 team ranked in the country.
Right.
That was that always had the potential to be a letdown. That always had the potential to be something where USF struggles, right? I think when it comes down to it, you're not going to see the letdown. I think my biggest worry is how do you compete with, like, let's not mince words here. Florida is one of the most talented teams in the country. They have the potential to be a top 5 team in the country. They have, in my eyes, a top 3 quarterback in the country. They have a fun running back. Their wide receiver core is deep and talented. You know, they have multiple 2026 NFL draft guys on their defensive line. Like, this is going to be a challenge schematically and on the field. So when I look at it, I think of it in the terms of, like, okay, how do you shut down the Gators pass rushing? And how do you ensure that DJ Lagway isn't just uncorking 60-yard bombs to consistently beat you down the field? I think if you come prepared with that same grit, that same mentality, in the same way that they simply just attacked Boise State with, I think they have a puncher's chance in this game. Now, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but I think the game looming next week is the one that I personally would plant my flag and be like, I think this is the one they steal. But I think USF is going to lay the foundation for next week, this week, and play Florida a lot tougher than a lot of people expect.
Yeah, I mean, we cover the team, so I do hope that is the case. I think a lot with UF kind of falls into DJ Lagway is kind of the pendulum that makes that team swing. And if he's doing good, if he's uninjured, if he's healthy, you know, I think they're going to have a lot of success. On the other side of the ball, a lot of that also goes, or on the other side, a lot of that also goes with Byron Brown. But it's not just Brown. It's really just the culture and things like that Coach Golish has really instilled in that team. Now, Mackenzie, I want to ask you, how important do you think it is that Golish has kind of built that culture within the team, that camaraderie in the team, and how do you think it helps them this season?
I think that it really keeps them all on the same page. So today, Coach Golish was speaking during his presser, and he was really talking about, like, the team is remaining process driven. It's kind of like the end result doesn't matter so much as how they got there and what they did to get to that point and how they're working to improve and how they continue to do the things that they do. And I think at the end of the day, they're going to continue improving their scheme, continue improving on, building that connection with everybody in the locker room. And as much as they do that, will help them execute well on the field.
Yeah, I love that. And last week, you ended up picking correctly with the USF Bulls beating Boise State. Now, before I let you get out of here, I don't want to hold you too long. What are your predictions for this week as they go to Gainesville to take on the Gators? I know I'm putting you right on the spot.
So I think it's going to be close. I don't think it's going to be a total blowout either way. Last time we played the Gators, it was, I believe, in 2022, and we only lost by 3 points. And that was a very different team, and we were like 1-11 that season. So I'm gonna say I think that USF can pull through for this one, and I'm gonna give them a score of 34-31.
Ooh, we got USF pulling out the upset in Gainesville. I like it. Brandyn, your thoughts on that real quick?
It'll be a very exciting time on next week's show if that happens, because if okay, I'll put it like this. I'm not personally taking USF to win this one. But if USF goes into Gainesville and beats the Gators, I would put my money behind, my hypothetical money behind USF being the GFI playoff team. If they go into Gainesville and win this game, I'm pending health, pending the rest of the season, I'm putting my metaphorical money behind USF to be the G5 playoff team in the college football playoff if they win this game this week.
Yeah, I mean, because what other team is going to have two ranked opponents? I mean, I know Boise top at 25, but beating a 13th ranked Florida team in Gainesville, I mean, even if you lose to Miami the week after that, it's kind of hard to not be impressed by what they're doing. So I'm very curious to see how that goes. Now, Mackenzie, thank you so much for coming on. Before you get out of here, can you just let everybody know where they can find you at?
Yes, all my USF coverage is on my Twitter, so it's at my first and last name, at Mackenzie Neglia.
I appreciate that. Mackenzie, thank you so much for coming on. You have a great night.
Of course, appreciate y'all. Thanks.
And if you guys aren't aware, Mackenzie does great coverage with Brandyn for USF. She's done a really tremendous job in her first year. Can't say enough good things about her. That type of consistency, work ethic, and just overall, passion and good demeanor really speaks to not just her, but it's also something we address here at the company, and we kind of live by that motto here. And if you guys are listening to this podcast, please make sure you are liking, subscribing to the channel. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're watching it on Twitter or anywhere else, please make sure to share it so that it maximizes the viewer. So guys like Brandyn, Mackenzie, and everybody else can get their maximized, reach for fans and just have more people seeing them. Now, we went to the two goods of the group of five that we cover. Now we are in the not so good portion, and that would be Florida Atlantic, who got mollywopped, man, absolutely destroyed by Maryland in week 1. It was 39-7, but honestly, it probably could have been a lot worse than that. Caden Velkamp threw 4 interceptions. His backup even threw 2 interceptions. Wasn't a great game despite the first quarter, making it look a little closer than it probably should have been. Maryland had a 26-point second quarter, which is just insane to think about. Brandyn, what are your initial thoughts on that game?
I was just shocked, right? And like we talk about USF, like regardless of what they do these next 2 games, right? They started their season right where they needed to. And even if they lose the Florida game, like I personally expect them to, and they lose the Miami game, they're still in a pretty solid spot for their American slate. Are they in a solid spot for the college football playoff? Probably not, because quite frankly, there's a lot of really damn good group of 5 teams.
Yeah.
When it comes to FAU, we talked a lot, whether it's on this show, whether it's off this show, about our optimism for FAU's offense. We talked about about essentially what we're looking for, what we want to see, what we want this team to be compared to like what we saw last year.
Right.
And honestly, like I was very concerned, not from a large scale perspective yet, but just like you didn't just lose to Maryland. Maryland walked all over you, right? Yeah. And that's that. With that being said, I was a big fan of a lot of what the defense did. They made things on Maryland very, very difficult. And that is something that I'm personally optimistic about. If this defense is way better than everyone expects, that raises your floor immediately. Yeah. Especially against teams in the American. Shutting down P4 size rushing attacks for that much, for essentially the majority of the game, and holding out against Malik Washington for large swaths of the game. The defense for that first half, I would say, did exactly what they needed to do. Here's the problem. Your supposed strength was anything from it, right? Yeah. Velkamp was missing throws, but I think a big reason he was missing throws is because the route running wasn't where it needed to be. And some of the passing concepts weren't where they needed to be. And I think another part of it is the offensive line just could not hold up against Maryland, right? And then because of that, he starts holding the ball, trying to make a play happen. And that causes everything cascades. Football, when a breakdown happens, it's never just because of one thing. One thing may trigger it, but then a bunch of other things happen consecutively.
Right.
If I were to categorize my main concerns for FAU out of this game, It's the offensive line first and foremost, and then what's going to happen in situations where everything isn't kept clean for Velcamp. I think those are my two main things. Because quite frankly, and maybe you disagree with me on this point, I'm not that overall concerned about the defense completely imploding.
No, this is so it's interesting. I'll address the defensive point, I guess, first. And the defense was incredibly surprising. It was actually very, very surprising because I didn't expect them to stop the rushing attack the way that they stopped the rushing attack of Maryland. Now, that's not to say, I mean, getting to the passer is a whole different story because they weren't really able to do that. But give credit where credit's due. They did make Maryland one-dimensional when they had to. When you're stopping the run, you're forcing guys to pass. And, you know, to their credit, FAU was playing pretty good defensively. But when you're so many times, I believe that FAU was, I think, 3 of 9 on fourth down. There was a lot of early fourth down conversions. At one point, they were 1 for 6 on fourth down. So when you're giving your defense a short field to defend right after doing a 3-and-out or a 4-play drive where it, you know, sputters out, or even a 6-play drive, you're leaving a lot on your defense. So I think it's interesting because me and you've talked about this. Our biggest concern entering the season was the defense, but how they performed against a P4 unit, you got to be impressed, man, even though there's not many superstars on that defense. Although I do want to give out a shout out to Tyler Stolsky, who was wearing a club and just being a maniac and a madman as a pass rusher in coverage and just an overall tackler. Leon Hart, too. He did great as well. But I think you hit the nail on the head is where if the pressure gets too much to Caden, how is he going to perform? And we kind of saw that last year. For those who aren't aware, me and Brandyn were actually in attendance for Caden's last game with Western Kentucky, and it was against James Madison, and he struggled when he was under pressure. We kind of saw that similar type of performance against the Dukes, against the Terps this year for their week 1 game. Although this one had a much different result where, you know, that Boca Raton Bowl was a lot closer of a game. This one was a blowout essentially by halftime. It was done. So that's something I'm very, very concerned with. You know, he was missing very, very easy passes that he normally doesn't, even when he wasn't pressured. I've talked to you and a couple other people about this offer, but, you know, suggesting that he's seeing ghosts a la Sam Darnold. How important do you think it is for the FAU offensive line to keep him clean in order for them to have success, not just next week against, Florida A&M, which should be easy for them considering it's an FCS, but just going forward in general?
It's imperative. Like, I don't want to mince words here. It's imperative. It is arguably the most important thing of this entire season. Because if Veltkamp isn't in a position where he can actually execute, if he's getting thrown off his spot immediately, Easton Messer is going to have 2,500 targets this year. And that is legitimately nothing against Messer, but it's going to be, okay, how do I avoid the pressure and make sure I get the ball out in time and make sure I'm able to keep the chains moving, right?
Yeah.
I don't care if it's Tom Brady. I don't care if it's Patrick Mahomes. I don't care who's at the quarterback position. If a guy's getting hit consistently at the level that Veltkamp was getting hit on Saturday, it's just not going to be a successful season. It just isn't. And no, you're not playing the caliber of team that Maryland is every single week. But let's not mince words and say, that's the second time I used that phrase tonight, whatever. Maryland didn't exactly have like the monsters of the Midway up front. Like, it's not like they're littered with NFL draft prospects. These are a lot of young kids. These are comparable players to some of the guys you're supposed to have on your offensive line. And it was not every spot, because there were some pretty solid standouts, as you would confirm, on the offensive line. But a few of those offensive line spots were getting beat consistently, and Maryland knew exactly how to attack that. I arrive at the point, and I don't mean to cut you off, but I arrive at the point for this week. If you're FAU And context matters in every single football discussion. This is only week 1. Things can be completely different 2 weeks from now. But I will say it like this. You have to beat FAMU easily. You have to make a statement. Because here's the reason why. Yes, FAU has beat FIU very, very frequently over the past few years. I don't think it's going to be as easy of a game as a lot of people think. These are both 2 very good teams compared to where they were last year. They're 2 very talented teams. And I think it's really a coin flip game, as I said before. And then, more importantly, for FAU season, you have one of the toughest American Conference slates. FAU is set to play USF, Tulane, and Memphis this season. Yeah. Only one of those games is at home, and it's Memphis, the first one. They have to go to Raymond James, and they have to go to Tulane. Guess what? That Rice matchup isn't looking so easy anymore, is it? That option attack, Scott Abel has that team rolling, right? Yeah. And, obviously you still have Tulsa, you still have UAB. UAB can score. It just seems like they can't defend, right? So, you have all these very interesting things where you're like, all right, how do we progress? How do we go forward from here, right? How do we make sure that our season stays on track and it's handled in the proper form, right? It all starts up front. And I'm not trying to talk in circles. I'm really not. But you have a tough slate. You have a tough schedule. You need to get it figured out ASAP. And I think they have a good shot to do so. But if it looks shaky again, and you have to figure out on the fly against FIU and Memphis, this thing could go sideways fast.
Yeah, and I know, I believe it was actually the first episode of this podcast. We actually talked about how we do think that, the Owls may have a slow start to the season, which that's fine. Slow starts are one thing. Getting absolutely decimated throughout, those slow starts, kind of, you don't get the bounce back the same way. A lot of guys will, if those games aren't close, guys will start to quit. Whether or not they want to admit that or not, they will, because they get deflated from seeing those large losses. And that's just what happens. We see that all the time in sports, from, the amateur level all the way to the professional level. If guys aren't winning, and then, it goes into potential locker room issues and and stuff like that, which personally I don't want to see, because I do think Zach Kitley's a great guy. I do think Caden Veldkamp's a great quarterback, and Florida Atlantic, we got a lot of love for the guys on that team there. So I do hope that they are able to bounce back. But right now, it's just very tough to see. And thankfully for them, they do have kind of a bounce back type of game against Florida A&M in week 2. But Brandyn, I do really appreciate you coming on here. Before you go now, could you just let everybody know where they can find you on your social media?
Yeah, absolutely. So, on Twitter at BPOC24, on Blue Sky at Brandyn-Pokrass at bluesky.social. I can't talk today, but, we got through the podcast. Also on Instagram, you can find me there. I'm very excited for this upcoming week, guys. I will be in Gainesville covering Florida versus USF. It's going to be a very fun weekend. It's going to be an exciting weekend. It's my first time covering a game at an SEC stadium, so make sure to follow along there. I'll have stuff on Instagram. I'll have stuff on my other social medias. And Thomas, appreciate you having me on as always, and we will talk very soon.
Yeah, maybe the first time. It will not be the last time, Brandyn. Thank you so much for hopping on. Now, that was Brandyn Pokrass. Make sure you guys are following him on Twitter at BPOK24. That's BPOC24. He is our primary guy at FIU, Florida International, and Florida Atlantic. He also as previously mentioned, he does help Mackenzie Neglia with the USF Bulls coverage. Now, before we start making our way to the P4, there were some other games on the slate for the G5/G6, however you want to call it that. I was actually in attendance for in week 1, the first of those being Delaware hosting Delaware State in an in-state rivalry, which was also Deshaun Jackson's first game as a head coach. Now, Deshaun Jackson does coach the Delaware State Hornets, and they did come up short in the home opener for Delaware. They lost that game 35-17, but that's not without them putting on, a serious performance there. Marquise Gillis for the Hornets looked fantastic. He had 17 rushes for 123 yards, no touchdowns, but the asterisk there is that he had multiple huge touchdowns or huge rushing attempts just wiped off the board completely there by penalties, which for an FCS school first year head coach, you kind of see that stuff happening. Deshaun said it in his presser, but he didn't think not to take anything away from the Blue Hens, but they really shot themselves in the foot, so to speak, in terms of their mistakes. On the Delaware side, they actually lost quarterback Zach Marker, who started the game. He is out for the year with an ACL injury. This is the second time, same injury that he's had before. So his season's done. I really do feel bad about that because Zach is a great kid, and you really hate to see that. In his place, was Nick Minicucci. Nick had 251 yards. He had 3 touchdowns, though. He went, I believe it was like 28 of 36. Another key player on that team was Jake Thaw. Jake Thaw was really I don't want to say, third and Renfro-esque for the Blue Hens, but he was just about that, making sure that drives were extended in the second half for Delaware. He finished with 92 yards and a touchdown. I think it included a 50-yard touchdown, but he was near unstoppable as a chain mover. Also, I want to give a shout out to Kyra Duplessis, who had about 89 yards and a touchdown himself, but he had perhaps the catch of the day, a one-handed snag in one-on-one downfield, running a go route. Minicucci wasn't supposed to throw that ball. He ended up doing so anyway, and just put together an absolute highlight reel of a performance. You guys can actually find that catch that we have on video on our Instagram at the League Winners. And if you guys are listening to this podcast, please make sure you like, subscribe, share to all areas that you can do so. I would do greatly appreciate that. The second game, before I move on to the second game, Delaware does go to Colorado and does take on the Colorado Buffaloes in week 2. Personally, I don't know if the Blue Hens have the juice defensively to kind of stop what Colorado wants to do. I think offensively, it might be a little bit difficult. Joe Silver for the Blue Hens, he started off a little bit slow, had a bad fumble inside the 5-yard line, but he ended up picking up the pace as the rest of the game continued. He actually looked great in the second half there. So it'll be interesting. I think Delaware loses that one just because, first time into the FBS facing a Big 12 team. It's kind of hard to say. The other game that I was fortunate enough to go to was Army versus Tarleton, which was an upset in double overtime as Army fell 30-27 to the Tarleton State Texans. Trey Page and Caleb Lewis, the running backs for Tarleton, were absolutely fantastic. Just like how I mentioned, Delaware State's offensive line, had some miscue penalties that kind of held them back. Tarleton State did too, and they still managed to stick with running the ball throughout the entire contest. Trey Page is just an elite athlete. I believe he's only a sophomore right now, but man, he just was breaking tackles. He's a P4 talent. He's a P4 talent without question. And I think that I think the gut punch to Army really kind of surprised them. I don't think they were ready for that at all. Dwayne Coleman for Army did not look too great passing the ball. Just so I can break down a couple stats. Caleb Lewis, 20 carries, 107 yards, a touchdown. Trey Page, 14 for 89 with a touchdown, but he would have had a lot more than 89. He honestly would have had close to 200 yards if he didn't have those penalties, call some runs back. He had at least 3 or 4 30-yard runs, no exaggeration, that were called back on penalties. And then, Dwayne Coleman for Army, 2 interceptions, 2 bad interceptions. He did have 24 rushes for 100 yards and a touchdown. But I do want to give a shout out to Noah Short on Army. He's the slot back there. He performed great as well. I'm very interested to see how his season develops because I do think that he's a talented player, and the task does not get easier for Army as they travel to Kansas State in week 2. But with that, I do want to start making our switch to our power conference programs. I do have somebody in the green room right now. That person is Cody Henderson, who covers the California Golden Bears with the league winners. Cody, how you doing today, brother?
How's it going, man? I'm doing good.
Hey, man, I'm doing great, man. I mean, first off, I want to ask how you're feeling because a lot of people, even us included, expected Devin Brown to start over JKS to start the season for Cal. Wilcox and company kind of made the surprise and started Jaron over him for week 1 against Oregon State. And it seemed to really pay off. I mean, that was one of the more impressive performances from a true freshman quarterback. Give us your thoughts on that game.
Yeah, I mean, the energy is through the roof right now amongst the Cal fan base. Jaron had the highest PFF grade, I believe, out of all of quarterbacks in college football. Yeah. And he only threw for 233 yards. So what does that tell you? He was on the money for a lot of the passes that he threw. He did have 3 drops that were, some, bombs. And they just kind of fell off the receiver's hands. But he just looked so poised out there, so comfortable. He never looked rattled once. And the offensive line played great. They kept him clean. No sacks, no turnovers. I mean, what more could you want? I mean, out of a debut, right? That's picture perfect. The vibes are through the roof right now. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, it's kind of a night and day difference, at least for the offensive line, where we saw Fernando Mendoza kind of running for his life last year. And this year, I mean, not to say Oregon State's one of the best teams in the country, but they're not slouches either. And there is history between these two programs dating, into the pack. Now, and also Jaron had probably one of the best touch throws I ever saw on the Tron Grizzle touchdown pass, where it just right in the basket, man, over the defender. Are you surprised that he's been this good? Like, I know we expected him to be good, 5-star quarterback, excellent guy. But did you expect him to be this good in week 1?
I mean, the only tape we had on him was his huddle highlights, right? And whatever we could find on YouTube. So, and then the Polynesian Bowl, obviously. So you got to see those little glimpses, right, of his potential of what he could be. But, man, I mean, just talk about impressive. Yeah, you're right. That ball to Tron, I mean, you couldn't throw a better ball. That's a picture-perfect ball. And he threw a couple of those too. The one to Mark Camper down the sideline off the right hash, that was in double coverage, and he puts it right on the money on a back shoulder throw like that. I mean, how many quarterbacks in college are you seeing make that throw, let alone a true freshman? So Oregon State, you said it, Tommy, but they were favored to win that game, right? They were 3-point favorites. Which I thought was crazy. I didn't see a reason why they'd be 3-point favorites, but they have Malik Murphy, who has played well. And then they've got Anthony Hankerson, who's a really good running back. So you figure that they were going to, can try to control the game through the ground. But Cal just didn't let them do any of that. The defense held when they needed to hold. They got a couple of turnovers, which were huge. And then the offense just, I think the biggest takeaway that I really saw, Tommy, is in past seasons, these Cal offenses, and it's kind of a theme around college football for teams that don't have good offensive line, but you see them whenever they get into a 3rd and long situation, it's always just a draw. It's that little bubble screen to a wide receiver. And Cal didn't convert a lot of 3rd downs, but, dude, they were aggressive. You know, it was 3rd and 15. They were taking a shot, and I appreciate that. You know, I mean, they didn't convert a lot of them, but dude, you never know if they catch a PI right there, or maybe defensive holding, get you an automatic first down, or you complete it. He just had a couple drops, and so I think that's something that as the season moves along, and they can start to pick up some of those 3rd down conversions. I mean, the offense is only going to get better, and so I mean, you got a Heisman candidate performance week 1. You've got the HBCU school coming in this week for the home opener. I'm sure Jaren's going to play really well in that game too. But then his biggest test will be against Minnesota in week 3. But I mean, right now, it feels good. It feels really good to watch. That was fun.
Yeah, dude, I bet it's kind of funny because you were one of the few people that actually picked Cal to win that game, just talking national media. And I know people can say it's home, well, we cover Cal, of course he's going to pick Cal. That's not the case. Just so everyone's aware, that's not the case. You made decisive points in the article when we went by this, even on the episode 1 where we talked about this on the show, where you were kind of confused why Oregon State was being favorited, considering how bad they lost to Cal last year. Now, I know there's a lot of different parts into that, but a lot of the defense kind of, I don't want to say remained the same, because they did lose Noah Williams, who was great. They did lose Teddy Buchanan, who was great as well, and they lost Craig Woodson, a great, Marcus Harris as well.
Yeah.
Now those 4 were centerpieces, but they've done a great job bringing in defensive talent. Cato Luave still there. Hezekiah Masses had the interception. You talked about turnovers in this game against Oregon State. And then I believe there's a freshman starting alongside Kate at linebackers, Luke Farrelly, correct?
Yeah, so if there's one thing that I trust Justin Wilcox on, it's defensive backs and it's secondary. I don't know if you saw the graphic during that game, but they showed all of the defensive backs that have been drafted out of Cal in the past couple of years. And there's like 15 of them, there's a good conversation to be had, good argument that Cal is DBU. And so Hezekiah Masses had an interception too. That would have been like a 104-yard return that they called a defensive pass interference on him that was incredibly soft.
Yeah.
And then he gets his ball don't lie moment, and he picks off Malik Murphy the next series. So, I mean, they went out, they brought in some good players for those guys that you mentioned that were good, and they left. Brent Austin and then Hezekiah Masses. And then they also have a starting safety that is another true freshman out of Hawaii as well, Aiden Manutai. So, Luke Farrelly, he played well. He got the nod over Harrison Taggart, who had the most tackles for BYU last season, which is really impressive for a redshirt freshman to kind of come in and play next to Cade like that. But if there's one thing that you can trust Justin Wilcox on, it's having a good defense. And it looks like the defense this year is going to be very, very good again.
Yeah, I was surprised when Farrelly got the nod over him, because that speaks volumes to how he's playing. But there's one aspect that I did actually want to bring up to you, is that how do you feel about the running game? Because I know they lost Jaden Ott, they lost, Jet Thomas, and I believe there was a 3rd or 4th guy. I think they lost like RB 1 through 5 this spring. But then, they brought in, Brandyn High. They brought in Raphael. I'm blanking on his first name. Kendrick, I believe. Kendrick. Yeah. And then they have a couple, other pieces in there. I know League is on the practice squad or scout team. But how do you feel about the confidence level of the rushing room going forward?
So I actually really like it. Now, that being said, I don't think any of them were true burners. Like, I don't think any of them are big home run hitters. But what they are is physical. And I think that that's what this team is like desperately needed out of that position. You saw a moment, I think it was LJ Johnson. He's kind of the 3rd running back. He gets tripped up behind the line of scrimmage, but he keeps his balance and picks up 7 yards. I mean, I haven't seen a Cal running back do that in a while, Yeah. And then Brandyn High is just a thumper, dude. I mean, they just felt so much more physical, which I don't know. That's huge for the program. Like, I'd rather them have a guy that turns a 1-yard gain into a 6 or 7-yard gain simply because he's physical and he's good at breaking tackles than the occasional guy that just gets tripped up behind the offensive line and maybe he'll hit a home run run down the middle every once in a while, But last year, we saw it too often where they would try to run on first and second down, and they couldn't get anywhere. So now you're in second and long situations, and that's how they got backed up a lot of the times, and that's why they started out slow on offense. So I really do like just that three-headed monster they have between Brandyn Hyde, Kendrick Raphael, and LJ Johnson. I thought they each ran the ball really well. I did think maybe they could have ran the ball a little bit more, but at the same time, I mean, it was hard to complain. They were, kind of doing whatever they wanted through the air. So, no, I really do like that running back room right now.
Yeah, I feel like it'll be a nice, multifaceted approach there where you can kind of just have the running back by committee and just kind of plug and play guys that they want to. And, as you alluded to, Cal didn't really have to run the ball as much as people may have wanted because they were kind of in control of that game from the jump. Now, just before I let you go, week 2, they do host Texas Southern. How do you think that matchup goes?
I mean, they should blow them out. I think, right? I mean, probably. Texas Southern, They have a great band. Another one of those HBCU schools that has a great band. So that's going to be awesome for all the fans in attendance being able to witness something like that because they truly are remarkable at what they do. But we'll see about this game. I believe they'll probably jump all over them. Maybe we'll get to see a little bit of Devin Brown and some of the other backups play a little bit just, so they can get a little bit of burn in case an injury goes down. This is kind of like their warm-up game for Minnesota, right? But I'm also really interested to see if Murray, the kicker, can continue his success. He only kicked 1 field goal, but it was a 49-yard field goal. And if you know anything about Cal, they do not have success kicking field goals. So to see, their kicker to nail a 49-yarder on the road, and Oregon State's a pretty tough place to play. So that was huge. But yeah, I hope Murray has more success kicking because you could tell Justin Wilcox, they'll put a little grin on his face for sure before halftime.
Yeah, a nice sigh of relief. Cody, before I let you get out of here, brother, let everybody know where they can find you out on your social medias.
Yeah, so you guys can follow me on X where I cover Cal football for the league winners. It's all lowercase at Cody TLW. And then on Instagram, it is Cody _Henderson TLW. So you can find me on both places. I need to be better about uploading things on Instagram. So I'll try doing that a little bit this week. But for all of my live content, where I'm on this show, and then I do another little Cal podcast, and then all of my articles, that all gets uploaded to X instantly. So you can always find me there.
Yeah, I mean, you and me both. I need to be better at my IG as well.
Yeah.
Cody, thank you so much for coming on, brother. I appreciate you.
Yeah, anytime, man.
That is Cody Henderson of the League Winners. He is actually our West Coast correspondent. He covers Cal primarily, but also handles stuff for UNLV, UCLA, and a little bit of the USC Trojans. Now, I actually have my next guest in the green room. He was at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, Georgia, watching the Syracuse Orange face the Tennessee Volunteers. He was also there for the Virginia Tech Hokies, taking on the South Carolina Gamecocks. He's been a broadcaster for multiple decades. This is, you can find him, every day at wakeupcalldt.com. He's one of my favorite journalists who covers not just the ACC, but the American. I'm very excited to bring on Dan Tortora once again. Dan, how you doing today, man?
Doing good, man. Doing good. Down here in the great state of Florida, decided to stay south for a little while longer. So visiting some family here after doing the doubleheader down at Mercedes-Benz. And then I will, of course, be up there this weekend as Syracuse finds their first home game with Steve Angeli coming up against UConn. I actually spoke with Steve, and that is going to be airing tomorrow. So we had a one-on-one conversation that I'm excited to share with everybody coming off of that game.
Yeah, I'm very excited to listen to that. Now, you were in attendance there, obviously. The result didn't go the way that Syracuse probably wanted. Let me get your thoughts on that matchup against Tennessee. What were you impressed with? What do you think that, what kind of disappointed you, I guess, a little bit? And what do you think the team has to work on going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think what disappointed, I didn't want to say disappointed, but I think the thing that, sits with me more than anything is what sits with Fran. They struggled to tackle. And, they didn't wrap guys up. They got beat over the top, they got exposed. You knew that Joey Aguilar was going to test Demetrius Samuel Jr., the true freshman, 17-year-old corner who was playing in his first ever college game, and he kept going after him, and he got the best of him a lot of the time. I think for Demetrius, listen, it's tough, but everybody goes through that moment, right? I tell people this all the time. I mean, Peyton Manning in his first season at quarterback in the NFL, my goodness gracious, they won a couple games. He threw a ton of interceptions, and people probably wrote him off, And so, I mean, I think for Demetrius, what did LL Cool J say a long time ago? You can't let the wins go to your head, the losses go to your heart. And I think he just has to really just take a step back and understand that it's growing pains, and they're going to find a way through it. I had a young journalist ask me during the game. She said, "Do you have any advice on when you have to cover a team that stinks?" And I responded to her and I said, "Well, first and foremost, the team that you're covering doesn't stink." I said, "The team that you're covering is going through growing pains. They're learning. There's a lot of new on this team. You got a relatively completely new offensive line. You got a new quarterback. Even though he was on the team last year, you have a new starting running back. Your wide receiver room has totally changed outside of Umari Hatcher and Daryl Gill. Dan Villari has become a more true tight end than what he had been in the past when they've needed him to kind of do everything. Your defensive line has had to be restructured. Your linebacker core lost two of their dominant guys for many years. And your defensive back room over the last multiple years have had a bunch of guys that are no longer on the team. Why? Because they're playing in the NFL. So this team, as I told her, is not a team that stinks. They are a team that has to work through some things, work out some kinks. And I told her, I said, there's a way to constructively criticize a team while still respecting its players. And I told her, my best advice to you is to write an article where you never lie, you always tell the truth, but you do it in a respectful way that their mother can read it. And so that was my advice to her. I don't think that this team stinks. I think that Syracuse, there was a few schools that played a difficult first game and that challenged themselves right out of the gate. I commend Syracuse for doing it. I commend Virginia Tech for doing it. I commend Alabama and Florida State. I commend Miami and Notre Dame. I commend TCU and North Carolina. There were a lot of people that right out of the gate said, hey, let's jump right into the fire. And then there's teams that played Elon and Duquesne and whatnot. And I have nothing against those schools whatsoever. It's just, I expect Pittsburgh to beat Duquesne by 100. I expect, Elon to not be a tough bout for another team out there. Now, I was surprised that Wake Forest beat Kennesaw State in what looked like a baseball game. And so that was interesting. But, I mean, what do I like about the team? Steve Angeli made some throws that other quarterbacks that have played at Syracuse wouldn't have made. He did some things on the move that I really liked. He was able to have good vision. His timing was good. He'll tell you that he needs to take care of the football, and that was something on his mind. He hates losing. I asked him in our one-on-one conversation, to give you a sneak peek, who hates losing more, you or Fran? And he was like, that's a really tough call because they both, can't stand it. He's, talked about it being the worst feeling in the world. So, I liked some of the play that he had. And I mean, Yasin Willis, my goodness, he is, my player of the week for Syracuse football. 3 touchdowns in his debut as the lead back for Syracuse, 91 yards on 23 carries. I look to some other good things that happened. Trip Woody came in his first opportunity with Syracuse, and he was able to get the ball through the uprights. So that was a good thing to see. I mean, again, this is a team that's going to take some time, but I was excited about the rushing side of things, and I continue to be. I was excited about the receiving core. Jonte Cook had a couple catches. Nice to see what he did. And Steve Angeli did some good things defensively. They got to tackle. They have to be consistent in a good way, and they need to scare some people, and they need to be a force. Do I think that Syracuse is weak? No. Do I think they're a bad team? No. Do I think that Tennessee was lights light years above them? No, I think in the second half, Syracuse definitely made the game worth watching down the stretch and got it to a point where it could have been a heck of a lot closer. So, I mean, yeah, they lost the game and there's no moral victories, but to long answer your question, I think the growing pains are happening, which is to be expected. And I think it's going to take some more time, which people need to understand in a microwave society is normal. And I think Syracuse will find their footing. And I really am excited about Steve Angeli. And I mean, Yasin Willis, my goodness, to sit in a room with that guy and have him stare the media in the face when he got asked the question, what do you think when you're on the goal line? And he said that no one can stop me and no one's ever going to keep me out. And that man didn't blink one time. So shout out to Yasin Willis. I would hate to be on the other side of him, but I am always enjoying the fact that when he sees me, he smiles. So that's nice.
That's always good, right? I mean,
Yeah.
when a guy like that smiles, it's better to have a guy that imposing smiling at you than to give you, the mean mug look. And he was fantastic. 3 touchdowns. I think it was 90 yards, 91 yards.
91.
Yeah, he looked fantastic. And Jelly, he left some plays out on the field, but he also made some plays that, like you alluded to, other guys who were at that position before him might not have made. So I think outside of that first quarter where Tennessee had that 17-0 run, if you look at the box score, I mean, Syracuse was right there for the rest of the game. Yes, they let the first quarter get away from them, but I think it spoke volumes, and I think Fran spoke about this too, is that the team didn't quit. They continued to fight even after that. Demetrius Samuel got picked on, as you said before, but he didn't quit either. He wasn't trying to do gimmies. He made mistakes, and it's better in my opinion, it's better for somebody that young and be a true freshman playing, to have those mistakes early, knowing the kind of caliber of player that he is, so he can kind of, hey, you had that bad game. Now you go into next week facing UConn, where you're going to have another challenging opponent in Skylar Bell on the other side of him. It's better to have those mistakes in week 1 where you can kind of build on that going into week 2. And that's kind of what I want to talk to you about is, UConn comes into the, the JMA Wireless Stadium, and they're not a bad team in their own right. I mean, they blew the doors off of CCSU, which they should have. And it's kind of what you spoke about too. A lot of teams took that week 1 to try to beat up on some smaller guys. Syracuse didn't do that. Syracuse went out, played at Mercedes-Benz, which is about 3-4 hours from Knoxville, Tennessee. So not a long travel for their guys. And they played hard. Now they come back home. They're hosting a UConn Huskies team, which had a 9-win season last year. Joe Fagnano's the quarterback. He's looked good, and it took a while for Jim Moore to finally put him in over Nick Evers last year. When it did, it pay dividends for them, and he seems to be kind of picking up where he left off. They have a good rushing attack in Cam Edwards and Mel Brown, but they also have Skylar Bell on the outside, who's a great receiver. And I believe they brought a couple other guys in. What are you looking for in this matchup? Like, what are you looking for from Syracuse to build off of what they had in week 1? Because I don't want to say week 1 was a bad performance. They lost the game. You can't, you can't take anything out of that, but there's a lot you can still take out of that despite losing the game.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is you have to let it die, right? You get a win, that's all well and good. It's, you got to think about the next game. You get a loss, that's all, that's tough and it stinks, and you got to think about the next game. So, I think that 24-hour rule, and it's funny when people call things, and you don't really hear this come out of my mouth because I just think it's kind of ridiculous to say, but, when people say coach speak, and a lot of time coach speak is like genuinely what a coach believes, and it makes perfect sense, right? You have 24 hours to celebrate a win. You got 24 hours to sit here and swear and yell about a loss, and then you got to let it go. So I mean, I think Fran Brown and this team, if they're smart, which I consider them to be, they are not thinking about Tennessee anymore, right? That happened a million light years ago. It happened down in Georgia. They're not in Georgia anymore, and they're going to move on from it. So I mean, I think this UConn game, listen, it's an old Big East rivalry. UConn doesn't like Syracuse. Syracuse doesn't like UConn. This could be like Division I versus Division III, and they're going to play till the end. I mean, that's just how it is. Last season, they played in the second to last week of the season and in the JMA Wireless Dome, and Syracuse won the game by 1 score, 31-24. So, you go back and you look at that, and Fagnano was able to get a touchdown with 1:29 left in that game to make it a one possession game. So he did do some good things in here. He was able to see his team into the end zone a couple times on passes, and Cam Edwards tied the game in the first quarter with a 71-yard touchdown run. So, Cam is back, Fagnano's back. So Syracuse knows that they're going to have some talent there at quarterback and running back, and they have something that Syracuse doesn't have, right? They got a returning starting quarterback and a returning starting running back. So, I mean, those are things that they definitely going to have to answer to. I know that UConn won their first game against Central Connecticut State and inside of the NEC, and they won that game in a big way. And Skylar Bell had 4 catches and 135 yards, which is insane, averaging almost 34 yards a catch. He had 2 touchdowns in the 4 catches that he had. And Cam Edwards got in the end zone, MJ Flowers got in the end zone, Victor Rosa got in the end zone, and Fagnano as the quarterback got in the end zone, all rushing the ball. And then, you look at what Fagnano did, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, 18 of 25 for 260. So Syracuse knows that this is not an easy task. I will say this, for the fake division that is the independent schools of this nation, UConn is better than Notre Dame right now, 1-0 versus 0-1. So I'm just saying it might not be that way for the rest of the year. So UConn better say, hey, we're 1-0 and Notre Dame isn't right now. I mean, celebrate it while you got it. But yeah, I mean, I expect this game to be high octane. I expect the fans to be obnoxious and, toward each other. They don't like each other. UConn, Villanova, Georgetown, it doesn't matter. When they come to play Syracuse, or Syracuse goes to them in any sport, it's always a dogfight. So, I mean, this was a bowl team last year in UConn. So I think Syracuse is definitely going to get everything that UConn can throw at them. I think they're going to make the game interesting. I think it's going to be closer than maybe people want it to be, at least for a certain amount of time. And Syracuse is going to have to claw at this, because UConn knows that they have nothing to lose in this game. They understand that they're going to be focused on as the underdog, as an independent that's not named Notre Dame. And Syracuse is coming off of a loss that they have to let go. Can't let one beat you twice. And so, I mean, yeah, I think there's a lot of talent on UConn, and I think their quarterback and their lead running back, as well as the depth that they have at different positions, is going to make for Syracuse's defense to be challenged. And I called Syracuse getting a fumble and recovering it. They did that early on in the game against Tennessee, and then fumbled the ball right back, which negated that moment. So now it's about taking care of the football and getting the turnover margin to be in your favor. So, yeah, I mean, the reality of it all is this is going to be a good game. It's going to be a pain in the butt, and that's just how old Northeast teams play each other. They can't stand each other, and their fan base doesn't want to hear about it for a year. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be interesting. And all I'm going to say is, if UConn fans try to hang another flag inside of the dome, I have my thoughts. I have my thoughts.
Yeah, that'd be insanity. Something good. I mean, they are returning. I mean, you did, allude to them bringing back Fagnano and the running backs and receive. So the one good thing is that Fran has seen these guys last year, right?
Mhm.
That he has film on them, not just that you see throughout the year, but he has film on him from what he was able to do and have success with himself. But one big issue that, the Orange had in week 1 was tackling. And I know you've been with me at these practices. We know how much Fran Brown has been preaching practice, preaching tackling in practice, wrapping up, making sure guys are driving towards, foot forward, never a foot back, making sure they're attacking head on. Do you think the tackling will be improved as they enter this matchup?
Man, I hope so, because I would not want to be in practice with Fran Brown if you're not tackling well. And I mean, he's very clear with these guys what they need to do and how physical they need to be. And I think the biggest thing is, you don't run to tackle, you run to go through them.
Right.
That's how I look at it, right? I'm not asking you to be a 16-year-old in your driver's ed test. I'm asking you to be a train.
Yes.
That's what I'm asking you to be. And, once those bars go down, consider those the sidelines. And if you're a defensive player, you're the train and you don't stop. And so, take a page out of the book of the man that was called the Express, Ernie Davis, may he rest in peace. And you're just going to have to run through people. Do I think the tackling will going to get better? I mean, that's up to the guys. And that's up to the guys listening to the technique, watching the film, seeing what they did wrong and making a decision. But, I mean, if you want to win football games, you got to hit people. And I'm not saying you hit them to injure them ever. I will never, ever say that because that's awful. And I coached soccer, and the coach before me had taught the kids how to cheat by trying to go after people's shins with their cleats. And I had to unteach them that. So I'm never going to say something like that. You just have to hit people in a way that makes them question coming back in your direction.
Yeah.
And I think that guys that are veterans on this team, like a Dev Grant, like Derek McDonald, who I got to speak with after the Aflac kickoff game, guys like that who have been in the trenches and been around the block, a guy like Barry Buxton, the third, who went from third string to first string, they're the ones that have to talk to these guys and say, listen, they need to see us in the open field and have that moment when we're coming at them. So do I think Syracuse is going to tackle better? I mean, if I'm Syracuse, I have been feeling it since the clock read 0 in Atlanta. I felt it on the bus. I felt it on the plane. I felt it when I landed. I felt it every single day. I want to flip my desk over in my classroom. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's up to Syracuse to answer that question. But I would be hard-pressed to say that those guys don't want to run through somebody right now because I'm sure they're very upset at the opportunity in front of them that they did not complete.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that's something that I'm actually looking forward to seeing is what kind of adjustments not just the players make, but also Coach Brown makes as he hosts this team, which is kind of a sleeper. I think some fans may be sleeping on UConn a little bit. They're going to be a tougher out than I believe is the consensus. Now, Dan, before I let you go, can you just give me your final predictions score for this week 2 matchup?
Yeah, I mean, my preseason prediction was Syracuse winning this game. They won the game last year 31-24. I think it's going to have the essence of that. So I'm going to say 38-30. Do I feel good about that? 38-31. That's what I'm going to say. 38-31 Syracuse in this game. And, I'm interested. It's defensively. I'm looking to see how they're going to respond defensively. This is Steve Angeli's first game at home in front of the fans. And it's the first opportunity for Syracuse fans to see their team really face to face because most of that stadium down at Mercedes-Benz was Tennessee laden. And it was a Tennessee home game, which I did not want to happen. I wanted the fans to show up, but they did not for whatever reason. And so Tennessee was loud, and it sounded like they were playing them in Tennessee. And so now Syracuse has an opportunity to go home. I know that UConn fans are going to show up. I know they're going to be really loud. I know they're going to try and get under the skin of Syracuse fans. So all I would suggest to Syracuse fans is there is plenty of things that you can do and plenty of Saturdays in the year where you can sit in your underwear and have Cheerios. This Saturday is not the week to be in your underwear at your house. It's also never a good time to be in your underwear at the Dome. So come fully clothed, but make sure you come to the Dome this week. This team is better when you're there. The Loud House is better when you're a part of it. And I cannot say enough about the fact that fans need to be in the stands for all 4 quarters because everybody misses it when the season's over. But those people need to punch their tickets, get in there. This team has put a ton of money, time, energy. They have scoured so many different resources to try and bring everything they possibly can to this season. So, they need your support and they need you to be there. And it's my hometown. So I have every right to tell you to come to the game and put your clothes on this Saturday.
I'm hoping they all come fully clothed as I will be there joining you this week. So I hope it's a great
Wouldn't that
game.
be something? Wouldn't that be something?
That
You
would
know
be
what I mean?
nice. Fans need to show up, make sure it's a sellout home opener. Got to have a sellout home opener. No excuses not to, especially against a Big East rival. Now, Dan, before I let you go, man, can you just tell everybody where they can find you on your social medias?
Yeah, so you can find me on Facebook at Wake Up Call DT, X at Call DT, Instagram at Wake Up Call _DT, and of course, wakeupcalldt.com has it all for you. And we are live in the morning, Monday through Friday from 9 to 11, but I always go past 11. So come and see us in the morning and follow us on the way to your lunch. But yeah, I'm excited for this weekend. I can't believe it's finally a home game for the Orange. Feels like it's been forever and a day. But I'm looking forward to it. And like I said, I think Syracuse will bounce back in this one, but I think UConn is going to give them everything they got, and they're going to make them work for it.
Yeah, I hope it's a good game with, Syracuse win at the end. Dan, thank you so much for coming on tonight, brother. I really, truly appreciate you.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I'm down here in the great state of Florida, and I decided to get out of the pool. No, I'm kidding. We had a birthday party tonight with family. So after the birthday party, I made sure I got some time to come on here and give a shout out to all the work that you're doing and your team's doing with the league winners, and always hoping the best for you.
No, I appreciate you, man. Enjoy that weather while you can. It's starting to get a little cool, and the sun's coming down a little bit earlier up here. So enjoy that while you can. I'm looking forward to seeing you.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing you this Saturday.
You take care, Dan. Thank you.
You too.
That was Dan Totora. You can find him at CallDT on Twitter. You can also find him on his website, wakeupcalldt.com, where he hosts a show every day, Monday through Friday, 9 to 11. And now I have another guy who's been patiently waiting in the green room here. A great friend of mine. He's actually been with the company since before we did a college football thing way back in the day when we did fantasy. It is my good friend who is nodding his head. He probably doesn't like this long introduction. It doesn't matter because he's going to get it anyway. And that is Brandyn. Hey, Brandyn, how you doing, man?
I'm good. How are you doing, Tom?
Hey, I'm doing fantastic, man. So let's, there's a big upset, but I want to save that for later because somebody did leave a comment that I want to bring up later, and we're gonna have another guest while you're on here. But I do want to talk about first the UCF game, which they faced Jacksonville State. They only won 17-10. Cam Fancher, former Florida Atlantic quarterback, was their starter. He got hurt. Can you just let me know what your thoughts were when you were watching that game?
Yeah, offensively, even when Cam Fancher came out and Taven Jackson came in, who is a transfer from Indiana and they transferred from Tennessee, he struggled early on, but he definitely got it going. He ended up with 282 yards and 2 touchdowns. Defensively, I think they were strong. Offensively, they had a lot of trouble. Cam Fancher, I think when he played, the longest completion he had was like 7 or 8 yards. They weren't really able to get the ball out to their wide receivers. They didn't run the ball for a lot. Miles Montgomery had 21 carries for 79 yards. And I thought they were done. There was a long delay because of the rain and lightning. So that caused some things. And there was really no report about Fancher. He got leveled. And it ended up being a targeting call. It was kind of reminding me of that Anthony Richardson play where there was someone coming, but I think the quarterback should have seen it. But regardless, he got leveled. They scored a touchdown. They called that targeting. There's actually 3 targeting calls in this game, 2 on Jacksonville State and 1 against UCF. The one against UCF gave Jacksonville State life. But yeah, a couple of things were interesting to me. I thought Jaden Nixon would be more involved. He had 3 touches for negative 10 yards. So
crazy.
So I thought, obviously, Miles Montgomery, I thought it was going to be more a 1A, 1B, but Miles Montgomery, at least this game, had was the main player on running back. He had a long 64-yard catch that they only were able to get a field goal out of. But maybe that'll change going in later games. The freshmen really didn't do much. Wade and Charles had a catch, I think, late in the fourth quarter. Dylan Wade, the tight end that I kind of spotlighted, he had a nice misdirection play where there might have been a hold on Miles Montgomery where they scored a touchdown. Jacksonville State's coach was going crazy. And then DJ Black, who came from Limestone University, he had to transfer because they stopped playing football. He had the game-winning touchdown. Defense, actually, I thought looked pretty good. Lewis Carter at linebacker. Philip Dunham from FAU looked good. And Jaden Bellamy had the game-sealing interception. It was on fourth down, so it didn't really matter. I will say UCF has to be more disciplined. They had a ton of penalties. A couple of their defensive ends were offsides in bad times. They tried to get a jump on the snap, and it caused problems. Jacksonville State kind of took advantage of those. They have not named the starter yet. They played North Carolina A&T, so, I mean, it should be an easier opponent. And Scott Frost has talked about there's so many things they can improve on. I don't know how you go back to Fancher. I know you supposedly can't lose the job because of injury, but I don't think Fancher should have been the starter anyway. And the coaches have said that Taven Jackson seems to have a more urgency after playing in that game. So maybe that's what they were waiting for. I gotta assume that both quarterbacks will play if Fancher, starts the game. But it'll be really interesting. But I think this UCF defense could be very solid for them. And if they have the weapons on offense, they just need to, get the right quarterback.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. I mean, we've talked about this off air that we thought it was interesting that Fancher got the starting job anyway, because I saw him at Florida Atlantic. I've seen him at Marshall. You got to see him in practices. It didn't necessarily seem like he would be the guy that would really move the engine for the Knights. I mean, I know I don't want to take anything away from him as a rusher because he's a great running quarterback, but obviously the quarterback position, you got to do a little bit more than run the football. You also have to be able to pass it. And I don't think that he's necessarily great there. Now, my question to you is, I mean, we both believe that he probably got concussed or something in that game, and that's why he got taken out. A lot of teams, they don't necessarily put that down, I guess, in the books. I mean, I saw it last year with Pitt and Eli Holstein. But do you think that there's a chance where they kind of do what UNLV is kind of doing with Alex Orji and Anthony Colandrea, where they have Cam Fancher kind of run a, I guess, Wildcat-esque package, and they end up having your man Tyson end up being the QB1?
So if they did that, I think Ja'Cory Brown is a better runner. So I think, and it was interesting, unless they changed the depth chart, early on the depth chart had Taven Jackson third string. So I was surprised because no one knew. We saw the big hit, and then pretty much right after that, they paused the game. And when we came back, Taven Jackson was on the field. Fancher was in street clothes. Like, no one knew anything. Like, there was no reports or anything.
Wait, they had him in street clothes that quick? And also, I want to apologize. I said Tyson, I meant Taven. But they had him in street clothes like that quick?
Well, I mean, there's like an hour and a half delay. So.
Oh, okay.
So, like, right when they came out back for the weather, like, I was surprised when Taven Jackson was out there. I thought they might have just benched Fancher.
Right.
But then they said that they never actually said what he had. There was nothing on the broadcast. They said they hadn't heard anything. No one really said anything. So that was very interesting to me. But it was good that they got that win. They ended up missing a field goal, which I thought when they missed the field goal they were going to lose. But because then Jacksonville State drove down for the touchdown. And then they ended up tying the game back up. But the way the offense was going, I didn't necessarily see that. But with Taven Jackson, he was getting the ball out. Actually, the throw to Miles Montgomery for 64 yards was a great throw. He was pressured. He threw it off one foot, lofted it. I think he has better touch. He has more zip on the balls. I think they could do pretty well if they if Taven Jackson can play like he did the last quarter and a half of the game.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see. And, you talked briefly about North Carolina A&T. That's kind of a good warm-up game for them because they have the bye week right after that before they host Bill Belichick and the Tar Heels. Now, before we get on to the rest of some of the other teams, we do actually have somebody in the green room. And I do want to bring him in to talk about a great game that was between Auburn and Baylor. We are going to bring on Shane Barrett. Shane, how are you doing today, man?
I'm good, man. How are y'all?
I'm doing great. Now I wanted to get your thoughts. Big week one matchup.
Whew.
I know a lot of people didn't think Auburn was going to pull it through. What are your thoughts on that game?
Man, the first drive on offense, Auburn went 3 and out, and everybody and their mother panicked. Like, oh, dear God, is this what we have to look forward to for the rest of the season? And I was like, I tried to have patience. And I think it was Drunk Aubie is the X account tweeted, describing an Auburn fan in 3 words or less. And at first I replied, second quarter Baylor, because it was the perfect epitome of it. We're up, we're leading the game, and then things go horribly wrong and they make a comeback. And then later, I quote tweeted it and I was like, this is more than 3 words, but it perfectly describes it. Auburn is currently up 14 points going into the fourth quarter. And I am sweating this game like we're losing by 7. So the fact that we were able to pull it out by 14 with the very limited passing game against what I think is going to be a good Baylor team by the end of the season was really what I wanted to see. I know a lot of people are kind of freaking out about the passing game. He only threw for 108 yards. Cam Coleman only had 1 catch. Eric Singleton had 3 catches for 20 yards, and people are just generally freaking out about that. But I was in the process of writing the Ball State Auburn preview before I jumped on here, and it's like Baylor ran 2 high safeties the entire night.
Yeah,
they screamed run the ball, and Hugh Freeze did it. And I think that shows a huge change for Hugh. He's even said it where he was like, man, I wanted to pass. Man, I really wanted to throw the ball. I wanted to get the ball to those guys. And he did, and he stuck with the run, and it paid off. So I know that was a lot, but that's kind of my thoughts so far going in, at least from the Baylor game.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's kind of funny that he said that because he really didn't try to force the pass. I think Arnold only had like 17 or 18 total attempts.
Yeah,
and
I think he was 11 for 17, if I remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, but he did run the ball ridiculously well.
Yeah.
It was like 16 rushes for 137 and a touchdown.
Yeah.
So that was insane. That was great to see. It was a little surprising that they were able to run all over Baylor's defense like that, but
Yeah.
if it works, it works.
Yeah,
and
you got to
then-
stick with it.
Yeah, exactly. And then on the other side of the ball, I thought it was impressive. I mean, I know they gave up 400 passing yards, but they made the Baylor offense one-dimensional, where only the passing was working. They couldn't run the ball at all.
No, they couldn't run the ball at all. And it's funny, Brandyn and I are actually in a Devy league together, and I think he has Bryson Washington. So I knew that name going into it a little bit. And he's a 1,000-yard rusher last year, and they held him very, very well. Defensively, I am concerned about our secondary, but more so the safeties. The 2 corners, Jay Crawford and Kayan Lee, both I thought played perfectly fine. I was listening to a podcast, and Crawford, I think, was targeted 3 times, or it might have been targeted 5 times. He gave up 3 catches for 33 yards, I think, but 32 of those were on yak. So he basically had 2 catches for 1 yard that he had limited Baylor to, and then they got 1 that broke off. So I'm good with that. And Kayan Lee had that questionable pass interference call. I have no idea what that referee was looking at. Like, he didn't touch him. Like, they were both hand fighting. He made a play on the ball, the receiver didn't, and they called pass interference. I was shocked. So I was fine with them. The safety play needed vast improvement, and tackling in general needed vast improvement. But I think that'll come. I think that's something that's easily coachable. And with the defensive line that we've got, like, it's going to be hard to throw on Auburn, I think, long term.
Yeah, that's actually kind of a good segue for what I was going to ask you next, because this upcoming week, you mentioned Ball State and Auburn's going to have their home opener. What are you specifically looking for from the team in this matchup? Like, I want to see this happen.
I want to see the passing game flourish and expand. I would be okay with Hugh forcing the ball a little bit in the passing game this week, but I want to see Cam get involved. I want to see Eric Singleton get involved. Again, Auburn has one of the best wide receiver rooms in the country. I want to see them used this week, and make sure that they are warming up for that Oklahoma game. I don't want Ball State to be overlooked. I don't want South Alabama to be overlooked. Next week, I think that's going to be a challenging game, but we basically have 2 weeks to tune up for Oklahoma. And so with that this week specifically, especially against Ball State, who they allowed 340 yards to Purdue. We got to be able to go out there and throw the ball against them and really make them pay for that. So that's what I'm looking for. I'd really like to see Jackson Arnold out of there by halftime and get some Deuce Knight playing time as well. I think that's going to be a huge key for long-term success. And I think in keeping Deuce, like with the way that the transfer portal works these days, like I think Deuce is a true Auburn man, if you will, and will stay. But there's also part of me that like it's the transfer portal era. Like you got to keep him enticed to stay, and I think by getting him some playing time early, it'll help that long term.
Yeah, I was kind of blown away that Ball State let Purdue kind of dog walk them in week 1.
31-0.
Yeah, considering how Purdue's season went last year. You hit the nail on the head. I'm a huge fan of Cam. Actually, I love Eric too. From his time with Georgia Tech. I don't think the Auburn receiving room is getting as much respect as it is. Didn't help week 1 that they didn't have to pass the ball. But I think that when they do pass the ball going forward, I think that people are going to be pleasantly surprised with how successful they are. Now, I just wanted to get your predictions on what you think ends up happening in this week 2 matchup against Ball State.
Well, that's a good question. It'll be a blowout. I don't know what the final score. Let's say 45-3, just for kicks and giggles. I think probably on the first drive, you'll see Auburn stick to what they did last week and run the ball, just to kind of get in a rhythm. But then I think that once we get into our second offensive drive, you should see the passing game flourish and expand. Stop using the word flourish, Shane. Expand. And really get those guys involved. And maybe, I mean, the thing that I liked against Baylor was specifically with Singleton is Hugh kept him in motion all game long. And I think that allows for different wrinkles throughout the game. And I think that Auburn and Hugh will have the ability to, blow that up even more and kind of show Singleton's true versatility. And then pair that with Cam, who I'm also hoping, like with Singleton there, has developed more as a route runner. I'm not saying Cam's a bad route runner. I don't think he is, but I would love for him to get even more technically sound than he already was. Because I think if that's the case, then he should be right up there with Jeremiah Smith. And I know that's probably bold, but if you've watched Cam Coleman, like he's pretty damn good. Yeah. So, and then get some experience for the younger guys like Malcolm Perry, Thompson, and Bryce Kane.
Yeah, I actually love that. And I think Auburn fans are going to be happy that nothing against Peyton Thorne, but I think Auburn fans are happy that they have, Jackson Arnold and Deuce to kind of step in after him going forward. Now, before I let you go, what do you think is the long-term outlook for this Auburn team? Because I know week 1 was kind of up in the air. It could have been a 50-50 game against Baylor, who is a good team. And how do you think it plays out? Because they are in, obviously SEC team, tough conference.
Shoot, I had it as a 50-50 game.
Yeah.
I think the ceiling is ultimately 10-2 still. I can't remember if we talked about that last week, but I think the ceiling is ultimately 10-2. I kind of see it as we've got Oklahoma and A&M. I think we will end up splitting those. We'll call it Bama and Georgia, even though they're different parts of the season. We'll end up splitting those, I think. And then ultimately it's going to come down to that Missouri, Kentucky, Arkansas, and we'll throw in Vanderbilt just because freaking Diego Pavia. But in that stretch, there's just a part of me, like everyone that I've listened to thinks it's going to be the Missouri game that we end up dropping. And I don't know. The reason, if I remember right, Auburn lost last year to Missouri, but it was because of our kicking game. And if Alex McPherson is healthy, I mean, shoot, I think I said it in the preview article, was like, if Alex McPherson is healthy, we probably win 2 or 3 more games last year.
Right.
And same thing if our quarterback play is different. We probably win 2 or 3 more games last year. So if you combine those, we're probably more of an 8 or 9 win team, which I think is where we're leaning towards this year. So to ultimately answer your question, I really think we'll end up going 9-3 with a ceiling of 10-2. And because we won against Baylor, I don't think we'll be worse than 8-4.
Yeah, I don't hate that. I know that the merry-go-round, I guess, against quarterbacks last year obviously doesn't help. You guys aren't going to have that this year, which is going to be huge. And I think we're going to kind of see how Missouri plays against Kansas this week is a good litmus test for them to kind of match up of how Auburn's going to play against them too. I think that'll be good. Now, Shane, before I let you out of here, man, can you just let everybody know where they can find you on your social media?
Yeah. Main thing is just follow me on X at FFShaneB. You'll find all of my Auburn articles for the FF League winners, and then anything that I'm doing from a fantasy football content standpoint there as well. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for coming on, Shane. I appreciate you, man.
Yeah, man. See you.
Right, and that was Shane Barrett. You can find him at FFShaneB on Twitter or X or whatever you call it. Now, Brandyn, the other team that you cover is FSU, where they mollywopped Alabama Crimson Tide in their week 1 matchup at home. We had league winners, had our photographer, Stephen Bernard, on site there. Shout out to Stephen, who is on the sideline and in the locker room after the game. That was some vibes. You should make sure to check that out at SB Productions on Instagram. But Brandyn, I wanted to get your thoughts. Were you surprised? I mean, everyone was surprised. How surprised were you that FSU beat Alabama the way they did?
Yeah, very surprised. I thought that Tommy Castellanos would have to pass the ball more. He only had, I think, 150 yards passing, and on the first drive, he had a 40-yard completion. Alabama, I've seen this all over, social media. They got their ass kicked up front. Defensively, offensively, Florida State just did really whatever they want to do. In my preview, I said Florida State needed to stay in manageable distances. So on third down, Tommy Castellanos could run the ball. I said they needed to stop the run. They did. I thought Alabama would be able to pass the ball more. One thing I really like for Florida State is they have that swagger back. They lost it last year. This is even the defense kind of reminded me of those 90 defenses that would hit people and everything, because Ryan Williams had 2 or 3 drops over the middle, and I think he was scared to get hit.
And he didn't look good.
Yeah, like he kept on dropping passes. And the crazy thing was they should have had like 8 sacks. Ty Simpson actually did a good job evading the sacks, but once he got like free, he would like throw the ball on the ground when a guy was open. Like he did everything up until like he made that pass. And a lot of people have said they might not have won that game, but it would have been closer with Milroe because Milroe would run those and Simpson's going to pass. And their rushing game is not very good. Alabama's defense was confused all the time. The 2 reverses that Florida State had to Darcy, one for a touchdown, they were totally out of place. Any play action, you could see all the linebackers run up. I was actually impressed by the Florida State secondary. It looked very good. Earl Little Jr., which I talked about last week, he did not do great last year. He looked very good, in a leadership type position. Justin Cryer, linebacker, he was stopping the run very well. They were getting pressure. So they look like a totally different team. I wasn't wrong in what I said, because in the preview for Florida State, I said that teams that can stop the run, I think will beat them. And I thought Alabama could do that, but they didn't. It's not like they passed the ball for a lot of yards, which,
I think Castellanos had 152.
Yes. And I was confused why Deuce Robinson and Squirrel White went there, because they're not, I don't see them both getting targets. There's going to be some games where one does more than the other. I talked to you earlier. They are force feeding the ball to Jalen Lucas. Gus Malzahn must love him some Jalen Lucas, because he's he had all the sweeps. They're throwing him the ball. He almost did cost
6 rushes, right?
Yeah,
6 rushing attempts.
He did muff the punt. It took a weird bounce and hit his leg. And I thought that's when Alabama was going to make a run, but they weren't able to do it. Florida State held them. In my article about the recap, I kind of talked about how there were times in that game they could have folded like the team did last year, and they didn't. Like the fumble on the punt. And then when Alabama brought it within 7, then they had a long drive. They went for it on 4th and 1 at their own 34. Yeah. And that really, if they missed that, they probably lose the game. But I think Norvell really understood, that he didn't want to play around. He wanted to have the offense, finish off the game. So, I'm very interested to see later in the season, because I don't know if this Alabama team's that good. I don't know how good they are. So I've seen this with Gus before. I've seen where he's like a master with running the ball, and then he throws up a stinker out there later. Not to say that he's going to do it probably in the next 2 weeks, but later on in the season, I just want to see the consistency. And Tommy Castellanos, it was probably one of the better games he's had in quick decision making. We talked, he didn't pass for a lot, but he made the right reads. He did pull it when he needed to get those 4, 5, 6 yards. And they talked about in the broadcast, he's more quick than fast. He's very quick and explosive, changing directions, especially on those read options. He's not necessarily going to blow people away with straight line speed, but he definitely showed something there. And with the ACC, I think Florida State and Miami are going to do better than a lot of people thought, and Clemson might have a bigger test with those two teams than we thought before the season.
Yeah, you might not be wrong. And Red Hill Ranch comes in from X/Twitter saying Alabama's weak sauce. Do you agree with that, Brandon?
They were. This is what I hate about preseason rankings. Even though we did them after week 0, but you don't know how good teams are going to be. So, that's why I think they should look at the wins, where the team ends up. So, when you play them, they might be 8th, but where are they at the end? But it really doesn't matter because of the college football playoff. It's different. But this changed. I put my article on Reddit for the preview. No one gave them a chance to beat Alabama. There's a lot more hope within the program right now. I kind of gave Castellanos a hard time for saying the smack talk before the game, but it seemed like Florida State needed someone to bring that back to the program. So maybe it worked. You could tell, they talked about this program. There's a ton of players on Florida State that are trying to get their second chance. Castellanos, Norvell, Gus Malzahn, the receivers, some transfers on defense. So a lot of them had a chip on their shoulder, and they came in and played very well against Alabama. And I think once they matched Alabama's first score, I think that really helped their mindset that they could play with them, because there was a 3rd down where Alabama stopped them, but there was a holding call, so they got new life, completed a 40-yard pass, and then Castellanos scored a rushing touchdown. If it wasn't for that penalty, who knows how the game really goes. But after that first drive from Alabama, the Florida State defense really played well after that.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised with how well they, FSU really didn't just stop the passing attack, because I mean, Ty Simpson had went 23. He passed the ball 43 times. He only put up 254 yards. Now I know they didn't intercept him, but still, you know, you're attempting 43 times. That's because you're making them one-dimensional. That's because they stopped the run. I mean, I don't think Alabama had 100 rushing yards in the game. If not, it might have been just at 100, which for college football purposes is pretty insane to think about. Now, there was that drama between Malzone and Norvell to start the year and practice and things like that. That seems for now to be put at bay. And FSU now finds themselves as the number 14th ranked team in the country. Now they have two kind of gimme games coming up against East Texas A&M and Kent State in week 3. What are your? I mean, I guess I'll have to ask you, what are your thoughts about FSU hosting East Texas?
Yeah, I mean, there's been in recent history, I know they weren't necessarily great FSU teams where they overlooked teams, and I think that's the biggest thing. Because I think they need another convincing win after this to really keep the momentum. And they just have the athletes. Tommy Castellano is probably not going to need to pass the ball a lot. I think if anything, they would love to get all those running backs more work. First of all, running back wise, I think it's going to be a mess to figure out who's going to be the main running back each game. I almost wonder if they started Roydell Williams just because it was Alabama, because he wasn't overly involved. And they really spread out. Gavin Sawchuk had a touchdown late. We talked about Jalen Lucas. Usman Kroma, he got 7 carries, and he looks like he's going to be a monster, when he really gets going. And Gus loves to rotate the running back, so I think it's just going to be week to week to see. But I think they would love to get, more of their younger players in the game just to get more experience, because they rely so much on transfers. They are not really developing the younger guys as much. So I think these next 2 weeks should be a perfect time for them to get the lead and be able to get the younger players in.
Yeah, I'm very interested in see that. And before we go to the next group, I actually just want to talk to you quick about another team. But before we get there, our writer Trevor Heyman actually comes in with his blurb for Wisconsin, who actually won their matchup very closely in week 1. Wisconsin faces Middle Tennessee State in week 2 matchup at Camp Randall. MTSU is coming off a 34-14 loss to Austin Peay in week 1 with starting quarterback Billy Edwards Jr. out for Wisconsin. Look for the Badgers to continue to be physical and establish the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. Improved pass blocking and confident play from backup quarterback Danny O'Neal are keys to this game. Wisconsin should roll into victory before a tough week 3 matchup against the Alabama Crimson Tide, which we just talked about. But before I actually let you go, as a Michigan guy, I did want to get your opinion on this game, which is perhaps the biggest game in week 2, I would have to say, is Michigan against Oklahoma. We have our man Jim Nagy from the Senior Bowl now there as the GM. John Matier, I'm going to pronounce his name wrong. He looked good in week 1. I know he's got some Heisman odds on him. Jaden Ott, who actually transferred there from Cal, looked awful. 1 rush, -3 yards. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the Michigan side of things. What was your opinion like on Bryce Underwood, and what's your thoughts on this Michigan team as they enter week 2?
Yeah, I just want to say I was actually kind of looking for games that we might talk about. I knew we would talk about this one. There are not a lot of great matchups in week 2 after so many great ones in week 1. The only other one is Iowa State, Iowa. So anyway, for Michigan, I was very impressed with Bryce Underwood. I think they kept it pretty vanilla, but he has the freshman record now for passing yards, in a game with 251. He looked poised. He threw on the run. He distributed the ball to a lot of players. He didn't run a ton. And on Justin Haynes, one of his touchdowns, he threw a block on the line, or either a defensive lineman or a linebacker that Sharon Moore even talked about selling him. He loves the attitude, but please stop. But I think he did very well. The defense had some issues. I will give New Mexico a lot of credit. They did not give up. Michigan actually did fumble a kickoff, which caused some of that. And Jayshon Barham sacked the quarterback. They called targeting. He scored a touchdown, so he suspended the first half. It's funny because the Big Ten commissioner and some other person very high said it should not have been targeting, but the NCAA is not changing
It didn't look like targeting to me either.
No, it looked like a regular sack. It just was like Barham.
Sometimes they look bad. Like sometimes
he's just like a monster. And then one of the defensive ends, TJ Guy, said that when Jayshon Barham comes in the second half, he's going to F someone up. So that is what they're saying there. And for the Oklahoma side, yes, material looked good. I did read some things about Jaden Ott because I was wondering why he only got that one carry. And apparently he missed a lot of time in camp. And they said they're going to get him more involved in the second game, which to me, why didn't they play him in the first game? I mean, it was a blowout. Like, I would think they would want to get him a little bit more because Bradley, the guy that did the best, he actually hurt his shoulder. And I think Javante Barnes got a little nicked up too. So just based on injuries, Jaden Ott might, be doing more. It will be crazy if, he left Cal and went to Oklahoma and he doesn't do anything. It could really hurt his career, especially with Cal, starting to get their offense going with the freshman quarterback. It will be interesting. Sherrone Moore played at Oklahoma, so he said, he has extra, emphasis on this game. So I'm very interested how this is going to go. Michigan's defense has to play better. I think sometimes in those early games, though, you kind of get lulled to sleep because Michigan was up 14-0 like midway through the first quarter, and then I think they just let some things go.
That's what it seemed like, at least.
Yeah, I never really thought the game was in doubt. Obviously, you want them to play better. Offensively, they didn't really run Bryce Young that much. They do have new wide receivers, so trying to get them involved. I will say I think Marlon Klein, their tight end, can be a big weapon for them. Michigan just rolls out those tight ends. He had 6 catches for 93 yards and had the lone passing touchdown from Bryce Underwood. But definitely saw, Underwood can throw the touch. He can throw, the passes with the zip. Obviously, against UNLV, against New Mexico, they didn't really pressure him a ton. So people talk about this Oklahoma defense saying it's great. So it'll be a good test for him.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how that goes. And like you're talking about with I know that Jim Nagy loves Jaden Ott. They were hyping him up even last year, going into this year, before he took that Oklahoma job. He was supposed to be a top 5 back for this upcoming class. Now it's not really looking like that may be the case. But I do want to get your prediction, maybe a little biased, but because you are a Michigan guy, I want to know who you think wins this game in Norman.
It is tough, but with Oklahoma's running backs kind of banged up and not really knowing that, I don't think they'll be able to just pass the ball like that because Michigan has some good rushers. Their secondary actually looked pretty good too. So I'm going Michigan 31, Oklahoma 24.
I don't hate that. I don't hate that at all. I think Mateer still has to prove a little bit to me as well. And if they can't really run the ball, which I think they'll have trouble with, I think Michigan should be able to do enough to pull out a close victory in Norman. The Sooners just have to prove more to me right now, I guess I would say. But, I really do appreciate you coming on. Before we let you out of here, Brandyn, let everybody know where they can find you out on your social media.
Yeah, on Twitter, you can find me at Haybe3. I will be, having the Florida State contact out there, tweeting different things about college football and everything else that Tom tells me to do.
I appreciate that. He's a great guy to have, Brandyn. Hey, Brandyn, thank you so much for coming on, man. I appreciate you.
No problem. Have a good one.
Gotta love Brandyn. Brandyn also is one of our other correspondents, along with Cody and Brandyn Pokrass. Brandyn actually helps with the content for Georgia Southern, who is done by our own Cade Rayburn, and also Coastal Carolina, who is done by Shay, who is a new member of our group. Before we get out of here, there's one more matchup that I'm very interested in seeing, and that is actually James Madison travels to Louisville to take on the Cardinals, and it's a very interesting game because James Madison is one of these teams that does not go away. No matter how much you think they're going to, perform and underwhelm, they just play well. And I granted, their first game, Weber State, big deal. With that said, though, they really beat down, Western Kentucky in the Boca Raton Bowl, as we mentioned earlier in the show, against Caden Velkamp, against Easton Messer, who are great players, despite the week one showing. I mean, Easton Messer had 19 targets, 15 catches, and looked fantastic in his own right as a receiver. But now they get a real test, and that's Louisville. And they have quite a few tests in this 2025 season. And now, the biggest question is, can Alonzo Barnett continue to stay healthy? He was the primary passer last week, 14 out of 22, 130 and a touchdown. Matthew Sluka had 3 of 4, 15 yards, threw a touchdown. Also had a pick. George Pettaway looked great, 10 carries, 99 yards. Wayne Knight, he's a sleeper. I'm telling you, he is very good. He is a sleeper. He had 7 carries, 89 yards, and a touchdown. Sluka also had a rushing touchdown, as did Barnett. Both had 30 yards and a touchdown apiece. Now, James Madison is just like your quintessential team. They really, really, truly are a team. And I can't express that enough, that it's like the sum of their parts. And there's something that they had last year. It's something that they did under Coach Chesney last year, where this team is not going to give up no matter what may happen. They're just not going to give up at all. And it's something that you really want to see from a program that could potentially be the G6s. We're going to call them G6, Pac-12 now group of 5 program, group of 6. They're one of those teams that could get that playoff spot. This week 2 game has playoff implications, with Louisville, a sleeper in the ACC, consistently good. Now they are a good football team against the James Madison Dukes, and even James Madison defense looks great. Jacob Thomas had an interception last week, as did Tyler Brown, as did Kai Holmes. They had 3 picks. And granted, I know it's against Weber State, but it's not a team to take lightly at all. And I think that fans may not quite respect James Madison because they are in that G5, G6 setting. But this is the thing. Louisville beat Eastern Kentucky 51-17. And now there's still questions there. Miller Moss had 2 interceptions in this game. Miller Moss didn't play great. A lot of what happened for Louisville came from their running attack. I mean, Isaac Brown had only 6 carries. He had 126 yards, 2 touchdowns. Miller Moss went 17 of 25, only 223 yards, nothing to slouch at, 1 touchdown, but he had 2 interceptions. And we're talking about Eastern Kentucky. The Eastern Kentucky Colonels, who are not a great football program. I mean, Villanova beat them. I mean, they performed well, but they're an FCS school. They shouldn't be at nearly the same level. And I know it's week 1. I know there's stuff that can be kind of figure, like how we talked about with Florida Atlantic at Maryland. There are some stuff that happens in week 1 where it gets a little bit fishy, but at the same time, this is something that you don't want to see out of a good ACC program. They really, really ran the ball down Eastern Kentucky's throat. They're not going to be able to do that against James Madison. I think James Madison's going to play them extremely tough, and it'll be extremely interesting to see how this plays out going forward. That is one of the key matchups that I want to see. Another one is Baylor at SMU. I think SMU will probably pull away with that one at home against the Baylor Bears, 2 Texas programs. But, at the end of the day, I'm really a fan of Rhett Lashley, and I'm really a big fan of Kevin Jennings, and I think that they're going to do amazing things. Illinois at Duke is another great game. Duke is another sleeper team there, with Manny Diaz as head coach, and Iowa at Iowa State is another great matchup. A rivalry matchup. We also have Central Michigan at Pitt. We do cover Pitt for those who are unaware. Pitt should take that one fairly easily, and then, to be honest with you, outside of that, there's not too many good matchups. Kansas at Missouri this week is a good one. That's a rivalry game. That should be very interesting to see. And outside of that, we've kind of hit all the best games for this week. As Brandon Hay alluded to, week 2 doesn't have too many great matchups as opposed to week 1. But week 3 is where things get a lot more interesting. So if you guys are listening, make sure you're liking, subscribing to our channel, whether you're on YouTube. If you're on Twitter seeing this, please make sure you're following the page at League Winners CF. You can find us on YouTube at The League Winners, or you can find us on Instagram at The League Winners, where we have excellent photography and videography content for all the games that we go to. Just for everybody listening right now, League Winners are a credentialed media outlet. Started with only 2 teams, and now we're at 15 plus entering year 2. I guess we're doing something right. And with that, I will leave it as is. This is Thomas Christopher of The League Winners. And hey, man, I'm signing off. So I thank you guys so much for coming, and until next time.